thank you, Kate. I think now we can start, and I'd like to welcome everybody today for an exchange between Europe and Korea on the topic of cybersecurity for IoT. It is one of the challenges that we face together, I would say, and this is definitely an area that calls for exchange and cooperation. And today we are going to basically have an exchange on how we approach cybersecurity in Europe and in South Korea, followed by a panel discussion. Before that, we'll be setting the scene with a speech from Mr. Alban Ferraud from Eurosmart. And in Europe, the focus will be on how we look at cybersecurity, especially in the consumer environment. So to start quickly, I will now give the floor to our opening speakers. With Mr. Luis Romero, Director General of ETSI, Mr. Emilio Davila from the European Commission, and Mr. Casey Koo, Vice President of TTA. Actually, I would like to invite you to talk in the following order: Luis Romero, then Casey Koo, and then Emilio Davila. Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Sorry, trying to unmute. I'm so new with all these electronic tools that I need to find where to unmute myself. No, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for being here. As Xavier was saying, I think it's a pleasure that we can be all together, Europeans, South Koreans, and trying to exchange and debate all that is cybersecurity to the IoT. Cooperation between us, between TTA and ETSI, has been very good and very fruitful for many, many years. So extending on this cooperation, I think is a great achievement, and I think we should leverage on this opportunity that we have to keep on exchanging, to keep on talking and identifying the subjects that are so fundamental to all of us. Now we are talking about cybersecurity, and we know how important cybersecurity is. I think we have learned through the past year how tricky it can be if we get any kind of cybersecurity breach in our communications, in our systems, and how important it is that we plan cybersecurity and think of cybersecurity from the start, since we think of standards, since we think of the solutions, we need to build cybersecurity in. When we talk about the Internet of Things, this is even more challenging, because when we talk about Internet of Things, this means that everything is connected, and a cybersecurity breach might mean beyond just a system not working, it might impact even safety of citizens. And this is something very serious, something we don't want to face. With IoT, a security breach might mean a deal breaker. We might throw the Internet of Things through the window if we are not able to really have cybersecurity embedded. When we talk about the Internet of Things, of course, the critical infrastructures are fundamental, are paramount, and we have also, we have always been taking very good care of the security of our infrastructures, and there's a lot being worked on, and there's a lot of measures, and we have control on our infrastructure. But now, consumer devices being important, they become even more important in the world of the Internet of Things, as those are the entry point of all our users, all our consumers, through the more critical elements. So we need now also to look at consumer devices, and we need to see how we are able to ensure an enough degree of security so that we don't put at risk the whole system. And as I was saying before, even the safety, that the overall security of a system is that of its weakest element. So looking at the devices is important. And now getting together and exchanging on the challenges that we have, because this is not a regional problem, this is a global problem that we need to address globally, is an excellent opportunity. With that, I would like to end my speech and let you start the debate on these many important topics that I know you will be addressing today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Casey, may I ask you to provide your own comments?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jaber. Actually, distinguished my colleague, Mr. Luis. Good to see you again. And Mr. Elimo, yesterday we met. Anyway, today is the second day of the EU-Korea workshop on cybersecurity for IoT. And yesterday we discussed about the smart. It's a very good discussion to share the information. I think that each organization shared valuable information and had a lot of fruitful results. We will continue to cooperate with each other. Anyway, personally, I am very happy that we met again. I already yesterday said we promised last year when we first cooperation online workshop in October within the GISC. Taking this opportunity, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you for your efforts and hard work to make TTA and EDGE workshop on continuation of EU and Korea cooperation. I believe that it will get better soon, and we will more fruitful result. One thing, the importance of the cybersecurity is that already Luis said that all things. So, but one thing I would like to say this this time, you know, I got this magazine. You know, it's a very useful magazine. According to this, released on the April 2000 this year, the theme is Home and Office Suite Secure. The first page, the handsome officer voice here. Maybe you can hear. Sir. So I would like to recommend all of you read this magazine. It's just free, but very wonderful magazine. So instead my speech is this magazine. All told you about the cybersecurity. Anyway, taking this opportunity, also I would like to express my sincere thanks that GA77, even though I didn't participate in the GA77, but my colleagues took place in the GA77. It's also very benchmarkable for TTA. Thank you very much for taking this opportunity. Anyway, this workshop, even though this is just only 2 days, but I looking forward to a very fruitful discussion, and then we will get together forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Casey, for these nice words. And I will put or share a link to the publication you were showing on screen for everybody to be able to read. Emilio, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Javier. So I'm Emilio Davila González, Head of Sector of ICT Standardization in the Directorate General Communication Network and Technologies in the Commission. And Really, it's a pleasure for me to participate in this workshop. Let me apologize on behalf of Tony De Coster, our advisor in international relations, that unfortunately that was supposed to join us and give this opening speech, but unfortunately he fell sick and cannot join us today. And I think Luis has explained it very well, the importance of cybersecurity. So we had yesterday the workshop on IoT and smart cities standardization. Today we are in a workshop that is really even more crucial than yesterday for the citizens. And in particular, we have seen it in this situation, unfortunate situation with the pandemics, where all the digital tools have allowed the economy, the people, the students to continue their activities. The important that having secure systems is for keeping the digital economy going on. So, of course, cybersecurity and the benefits that they bring to the citizen is very important for the Commission. You know, we had this Network and Information Security Act, that is the regulation that is being revised now. We have recently adopted the Cybersecurity Act, which also tried to harmonize in Europe and propose cybersecurity schemes. And for those cybersecurity schemes, and maybe IoT for consumers could be one of the next there's ones in the future, we rely on standards. And cooperation, having international standards, global standards for something like cybersecurity is really important, because the challenges are common and they face no borders. So it's better also to have common solutions. We are in a global economy. The threats to cybersecurity are not restricted to one region or the other, but are really global, and having global standard. And as we said, anticipating since the very design, very early design phases of the products could be good. And with our agenda for digital, we also give a lot of importance to this cooperation towards global standards with the different regions, because again, being a global challenge, we need global solutions that would also allow for accelerate the market take up, generate more trust on the consumers, so we can have more digital application and services available. And this is why also we funded this Project Indico, in order to promote this cooperation. And in particular, we are very glad to have this cooperation with our Korean colleagues. As you know, we have recently relaunched the political dialogue with the Republic of Korea and EU. And for sure, cybersecurity is one of the key points identified as a possible way for cooperation. So we really thank Indico for the cooperation, and we are really very glad to see the respective standardization organization, the European Standardization Organization, ETSI, and TTA, the Korean one, having these cooperations already for some years now. So I'm really looking forward the discussion today, and I hope, as Mr. Coe said, that this is not just not one workshop, because this is the second of it, but it will lead to concrete actions and concrete cooperation points, and really developing this exchange of practices that could lead to common standards. So thank you very much, Xavier. Thanks to all the participants, and I'm really looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Emilio. And I think we need to now to jump right in the topic, and I would like to now welcome Mr. Alban Ferro, President of Eurosmart, who will help us set the scene and highlight the role of a secure consumer IoT in our overall ICT environment, the role of standards, and basically expand on these topics. Alban, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you all. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see your presentation on
My screen. Great. Wonderful. Everything works perfect so far. So first of all, I'm glad to be here with you. So I'm president of Eurosmart, and I will present you briefly the importance of standards in the cybersecurity domain, and also make a focus on the particular topic of IoT cybersecurity certification in Europe. So a few words about Eurosmart first. So we are an association, a European association based in Brussels that was created at the beginning of the 90s. And actually that is focused mainly on digital security, biometry, and security evaluation. Historically, we were created with the expansion of the banking cards based on smart cards, but over time we expanded our expertise and our scope of action to broader topics, mainly everything that has to do with security, high level of security. So it's expanded to biometry. And in that regard, over the last year, we followed very closely the work done by the Commission with the preparation of the Cybersecurity Act. And indeed, we're involved in the next steps. Under Eurosmart, under the auspices of Eurosmart, two working groups that are of the utmost importance are hosted. So those are the ISKI, the WG1 and GIAS. And actually those two working groups, and I will get back to that later, are instrumental to support the Common Criteria Security Certification Scheme under the SOGIS agreement, because it provides all the needed expertise to support those evaluation, but I'll get back on that later. Also, we maintain, beyond those two technical groups that are really at the core of the CC in Europe, we also have some other groups that are mainly focused on advocacy. One on the cybersecurity and digital identity, which is very active also with the review of the EUID legal framework, one on biometrics, or a new one that has been created this year focusing on IoT with a very broad scope of work. Indeed, those two groups that I will detail later. And also one that deals with the market and technology survey to provide market figure to the market. So here, to give you an overview of our members, I will not detail indeed the members, but I just would like to stress something which I think is very interesting. Historically, as I said, Eurosmart was a community of industry coming from the security because it was created. With the expansion and development of secure payment card. But over the last year, with the new trend of the Commission to try to give a legal framework for security certification at large, we saw new actors coming from new regions that joined Eurosmart. And actually these actors are coming from the world of conformity assessment. So I'm thinking about the laboratory that actually are used to give CE marking. So for instance, SGS, but also Bureau Veritas came to join Eurosmart, and actually it was very interesting because it showed actually that the word of conformity assessment was getting more and more interested in the field of security certification. So they had already understood that cybersecurity would become a key aspect in their business. So the key topic for the 2021 year are very well aligned with the priority of the Commission. So indeed, we'll find the security certification standard, which will remain at the top of our agenda for a few years to accompany transformation of this common criteria scheme, but also new ones, including IoT indeed. I'll get back on that later. Identity, biometry, and also all the transversal topics that are data protection, privacy, and emerging technologies. Here are a few future topic also. I will not detail that, but you'll find all the important disruption technology, quantum information science, blockchain, cloud, artificial intelligence. So now I get into the importance of standards for the industry. So standards are really instrumental when you want to develop, to industrial, be it a product or a service, because actually you need standards that actually be prepared to develop your product, so that to make sure that actually your product will comply to requirement, be it required in procurement or into legal act. And you will use the standards to develop the product, and you will propose it to the market that usually require a proof of conformance. So this is either required by customer because it's considered as a proof of trust and quality, or as I said before, this proof of compliance to standard may also be required by the legislation, for instance, for CE marking or other legislation. And actually the standards may have impact over the different aspects of the product. It may impact the design of the product. So your product should be designed in accordance of such as standards. But it may also have impact when it's about demonstrating the conformity, because there are also standards that are made to demonstrate compliance to another standards. So those are conformance standards. And also you have interoperability test standards, which is another level of standards, which actually aims at demonstrating that a product or a service behaves correctly when integrated into a complete ecosystem. So we have those three levels of standards, and actually those standards may and are usually required to put a product on the market. Now comes the great concern for cybersecurity of products and services, because we saw over the past years how cyber attack could be harmful to ecosystem. So the cybersecurity certification actually relies on the same bricks. So we still need standards for the development of product, for testing them, for ensuring they are interoperable, to generate a proof that might be required by the customer or to put the product on the market. But actually to tackle the cybersecurity, we need another stage, which are other supplemental standards that will define security tests and certification methods. So this is another level of standards. We have it available, for instance, for the common criteria, because actually this is one of the great examples of how it works. The common criteria come on top of all the functional standards we know. And this cybersecurity certification also has some specific aspects, and those aspects are really lying here. Cybersecurity is a moving matter. So what was considered as secure today or yesterday might not be secure anymore tomorrow. And why? Because actually technology is evolving, knowledge is evolving, new people get new skills. And actually all those evolution actually may lead to a situation where new threats might arise tomorrow. And actually this specific dimension of cybersecurity implies two things. First of all, what I would call SOTA, state of the art. So actually cybersecurity has to always take into account the state of the art of technology, state of the art of what is possible. And secondly, another thing is the interpretation of methods. So you have to be able to interpret the test methodology, to interpret the certification method, to interpret it in the light of the spirit, the underlying spirit, so that you make sure to understand and to really apply it properly to the kind of product, to the kind of usage, the kind of technologies. And actually this requires a community of experts that is able to understand the method and understands beyond that the spirit, and actually decide and interpret how this should be applied. And also this community of experts shall be able to, as I said before, maintain the state of the art of technology, meaning what is possible to do, what are the risks, and maintaining over time to always make sure that the cybersecurity certification takes into account current threats and tomorrow's threats. So this is a specific aspect of the cybersecurity, and actually this, in the framework of the Cyber Act, may lead and will lead to a cybersecurity certificate. So in that light, we see that all that, the standards, but also the standards and tests and certification method for cybersecurity evaluation, all rely on standards. So those are quite stable documents. Once prepared, usually you don't have to change it every day. And actually maybe prepared by various kind of organization, be it European standardization organization or fora or consortium. It doesn't really matter, provided actually the method is considered as right, correct and satisfying. Here I would like to focus a bit more on this. This actually, which is actually this kind of block where actually you have to maintain something over time because it will evolve always. This is the state of the art, as I said, and this is also this interpretation. And interpretation has to be maintained as the technology also evolves. For instance, we saw over time new features in products. I'm mainly thinking about upgrade of software, for instance, in embedded hardware. This new technology raised lots and lots of questions about how to evaluate it. What would be the supplemental evaluation requirements? What would be the essential security requirement to enforce? And actually, this is also the role of this block that has to always keep interpretation of method in the light of the new capacity of technologies. And actually, these blocks actually can't rely fully on standardization body. Why? Because actually it has to associate indeed the private, the industry, namely, that will provide a product, that will also carry out the evaluation, but also the public authorities. And why the public authorities? Because public authorities, here we're talking about cybersecurity certification, public authorities are in charge of certifying products. This is their authority, this is their responsibility, and as such, they have their words to say in the way of interpreting the method. They have to agree because they will be at the end responsible for issuing certificate. They also have to be involved when it's about talking about the state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art method to attack products. They have to agree. And actually this box is maybe, would be, and is different from the regular standardization body we know, because here the public responsibility, public authority has to be present and actually has its words to say, but moreover has its final word to say, I would say, because at the end of the day, the public authority will decide, because they will at the end be the authority that would certify on the basis of those documents. Now we'll get back more on the purpose of the cybersecurity certification. So cybersecurity certification now has a clear legal framework thanks to the EU regulation that has been prepared by the Commission. And now I think something is missing, which is actually the link to be established with the proof of standard conformance with the requirement to be made by product to put them on the market. So I'm thinking, for instance, of the NLF and the CE marking that actually is working, is currently evolving to integrate cybersecurity requirements. I think this evolution should leverage on the CSA and the cybersecurity certification scheme being prepared under the CSA. This is very important for industry in order to mutualize costs that will be paid by the industry. So we're thinking actually that cybersecurity certificate should be the basis when putting on the market any product for which cybersecurity requirements are mandated. Now I will look a bit into this box how does it work in the course of the common criteria in Europe? So I describe it from a very generic perspective, and actually so far there was only one example, which was what's existing for common criteria. As I said, Eurosmart hosts 2 instrumental working groups for the common criteria, which are the ICT WG1 and GIAS. And actually those working groups are actually the one that maintain the interpretation of methods for smart card and hardware-based devices, and the SOTA, the state-of-the-art attack catalogs and rating methodologies. Those 2 working groups actually are hosted from an administrative perspective within Eurosmart, but report to SOGAIS. And here actually we find again this public-private partnership where actually the industry is involved, the industry provides this expertise, this knowledge, but public authorities, the SOGAIS, has its word to say and has its final word to say. So the GIAS works on the maintaining the state-of-the-art of methods, the rating methodology to know whether such and such attack is a medium level, high level, very high level, and ISKI actually work on continuous interpretation. Tomorrow, in the light of the EUCC, this scheme will have to evolve. Why? Because actually a new framework has been designed by the CSA, and actually those working groups must be maintained because we have gathered here a very good community of experts that know each other, that have produced very good work, high level work. Those working groups should be maintained, but should be transferred into a new structure that will accommodate with what is defined for the CSA. And in that regard, we propose within Eurosmart to set up a special vehicle, which is an ISAC. An ISAC actually that would host those working groups, and that will also gather all the stakeholders, because also with the CSA, we will all the European countries might be able to issue common criteria certificate, which was not the case in the scope of the SOGAIS. So new stakeholders will have also to be invited and associated. So other countries so far, for instance, I think, for instance, Bulgaria doesn't issue common criteria certificate at the moment, and tomorrow they will with the CSA. So we have also to invite and associate those members. So this is one of the purposes of this ISAC. Also, another purpose is to be able to tackle new technical fields, and IoT is one of those fields, to have specific community of experts focusing on IoT, and also potentially managing the vulnerability disclosure of also on products between national authority and key stakeholders. Now I will focus a bit more on the certification of IoT in Europe at a glance. So this picture is just to give you a kind of landscape of certification in Europe. So on the right-hand side, here we can see that we have 2 pillars that actually stem from the legal framework, which are privacy certification, which actually are provided for by the GDPR. So GDPR provides for potential privacy certification that could be required either by Europe or member states, even though so far we don't have any technical document and technical standards to do so, but it's something that is planned and possible. And also cybersecurity certification, we can get back on that on the next slide, which is provided for by the CSA. Sorry. And here, actually, those pillars are more from the industrial perspective, where actually we find the role of standards and conformity against standards. So what legal basis for the cybersecurity certification of IoT in Europe? So IoT as such doesn't really exist, because IoT, everything is an IoT. Actually, from the legal perspective, vertical legislation, which actually covering market or usage. So we have, for instance, the main one is the market surveillance, which actually regulates many fields of product and services that may be put on the market, and for which minimum requirements to ensure consumer security are defined. So for instance, everything that is electronic, everything that has a rotating machine, lifts and whatever are covered by this vertical legislation. and are required to satisfy a minimum set of requirements. And more, indeed, cybersecurity become a part of the consumer security. This is the reason why those legislation are being reviewed. But we also have others, which are the NIST, Network and Information Security, which actually covered what we call operator of essential services, for which a minimum level of cybersecurity is required because they are essential for the functioning of the single market. And also we may have IIDAS for digital identity, but there may be plenty of others. Everything that covers a particular sector may require some specific cybersecurity requirement. And also we have what I would say horizontal one, which is the Cybersecurity Act. I call it horizontal because actually, to make it true, it doesn't mandate anything. It doesn't mandate a product to be security certified. No, this would be the job of the vertical legislation, but actually this horizontal legislation organize cybersecurity certification, organize how this should be made, how it should be implemented, and the rules for recognition. And also, so several schemes are planned. IoT is planned, industrial IoT, 5G, and so others. And when I was saying that everything is IoT, I think IoT could fall in any of those categories. In the same way as actually, in some use cases, IoT could also fall in the EUCC. If you imagine an IoT for which the security is critical, for instance, an IoT which is involved in a key function in a nuclear plant, I think it's highly likely that EUCC would be used because the highest level of security would be mandated. So this cybersecurity isn't mandated. It could be mandated either to the vertical legislation or to the public procurement. And I think one of the key challenges for industry is to see which link would be established between those regular legislation and this Cybersecurity Act. At the moment, it's not clear, and actually nothing has been clearly made. And actually, we from Eurosmart are really waiting and willing to see which link will be established between this and those vertical legislation. And we know that work are ongoing for the review of the RED under the market surveillance. The CSA, actually, I will go quickly under that, define 3 levels of security: basic, substantial, and high. To make it simple, basic is a self-assessment. So a checkbox, you just tick boxes to make sure that you did this thing correctly. Substantial is a bit better because at least it requires a third party to intervene. So someone should verify actually that the product is well implemented and developed. So it's a review and testing. And in CC, it's below VN.3, and you have the level high, which actually is the substantial plus an assessment of the resistance to skill attacker. And here we find again the state-of-the-art attack. And then we need a community of experts, a continuous monitoring of technology, of risk, and so on. So you need all, again, this public-private body I was stating before. And this actually corresponds to security level, which in CC is above or equal to VN3. Now I will go into the CSA, its governance, and where standards could intervene. So here what you see, I hope you see it properly, but I think I cannot make it bigger, is actually how it works to set up a cybersecurity certification scheme. So here you have in the phase, actually, you have all the collection of requests, needs by the key stakeholders. So the stakeholders, private sector, the member states. You have the proposal from the Commission that actually ends up into what we call a union rolling working plan, which actually lists what should be prepared as security certification scheme. This will end up with an implementation act, which actually is handed over to the ENISA, which actually will be responsible for preparing a cybersecurity certification scheme. So in the course of preparing this cybersecurity certification scheme, they get through some processes, but actually here actually that standard will intervene. And actually here there are no rules. So if standards are available and are deemed as appropriate and useful to support the cybersecurity certification scheme to be prepared, they would be referenced by ENISA, or they could even be directly prepared by ENISA itself, because ENISA is also entitled to prepare document that would become de facto standards, because it would be the basis for the cybersecurity certification of product. So here there is quite a complex relation towards standards. This actually is an authority that will prepare what would be the reference for the cybersecurity certification. And actually, each document that I reference will become instrumental for the industry, be it a standard prepared by another body, CEN, CENELEC, or ETSI, or being document prepared by ENISA itself. And to conclude, I will just give you an example of what a contribution of Eurosmart to the common criteria certification, but how we could contribute actually to cybersecurity certification scheme. Here actually we prepared a protection profile for system on chip that actually have a secure subsystem, so equivalent of secure element, but not discrete anymore, but mingled within a system on chip. And actually we prepared a PPE protection profile that has the same level of security as the PPE for ICs, 84, but actually for secure elements that are not discrete anymore. And actually it was really a great expectation from the industry. And this protection profile is expected to be certified by the mid of 2021. And I finished. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Alban. I think this was a very detailed insight into how things are being tackled on the European side. I assume these are a number of concerns, I would say, and challenges that we face also, that are faced, sorry, also in Korea, and making sure that public and private partnership is working okay, is very much an item to keep an eye on, I would say. It is also important to realize that this certification ultimately will be used for market access. And we need also to work to make sure that we do cover security requirements on one hand, while at the same time being wary of the barriers that we might create to a smooth trade. Of course, security comes first, but if we can leverage the international cooperation in order to make sure that we have a common basis for these security certification, it will be very helpful. So I'd like now to invite two more European speakers to take the floor. I think we will first have Dr. Gisela Meister from Eurosmart as well, looking into how cybersecurity is approached for consumer IoT, and what this means also for other and future IoT schemes. Please be wary of the time, because we are already running late, and we'll try and be to the point. So is it, sorry, is it, okay, this is both Kirsty and
we are
Gisela.
both together, yes, exactly.
Sorry.
We make a common presentation, and I just let the floor first to Kirsty. So next in the next slide, I would bit explain the challenge we have to face as well for IoT. We have different device types, we have different interface, and we have to make provisions which covers them all. They have to be outcome focused on one hand, and they have to be meaningful on the other hand, to give impact for the user as well as for the manufacturer and the laboratories. So next slide. Thank you very much, Kirsty. Coming back to the conformance statement, you see Kirsty explained already that there is an Annex B, which contains an implementation conformance pro forma, and which you can then complete, and you get checklists, which could be very helpful to show the conformance. And for further description, of course, there will be the assessment specification, the TS, where this, by the way, this conformance statement will be mandatory to fill in, and will contain extra information. I will come to this. And the good news are that the assessment specification will be ready, not quite at the first quarter of 2021, but nearly. So it will be end of May, I would say. So coming to the next slide. So we have here an overview of the documents we already mentioned, but here you have it together. I think the EN, important, it covers all consumer IoT. We said already such its baseline requirements. So this is really a difference to the presentation of Alban. Here we talk only about baseline requirements, and they are outcome-focused provisions, as I said already. The TS is a conformance assessment against the EN, so it's a companion document. It's in the scope, it's designed for self-assessment, in-house testing, as well as independent evaluator, what you know from third parties. This is all possible for this use of the TS. And as Kirsty already said, there is an implementation guidance, a second companion document, it's a TR, technical report. And this helps you to see how which examples could meet the EN, and to get certain use cases, of course. Another, I think, topic we handled with ETSI, TC Cyber, are vertical standards. That means domain-specific extension, e.g. smart locks, or for instance, mobile devices now, which are used for consumer IoT. And this could be, of course, more prescriptive and could contain more testable and stringent specification, as it does with the TS, which is more generic, as I said, because we have to embrace all different types of IoT. So next slide. Now I come, as promised, to the status of the cybersecurity assessment. As I said before, it's in development, but nearly finalized. So the first intermediate version was already made already public available in December, just before Christmas. The final draft will be ready at the end of May, hopefully, but I presume very strongly that it will be the case. And the objectives, as I said before, generic specification for the conformance assessment against the EN. It contains, I think that's important, implementation conformance statement, ICS, what you already know from the EN, but as I said before, as mandatory. And then as well, extra information for testing. So this is a template actually, which you can complete. And additionally, a catalog of generic test cases, which are mapped from all provisions of the EN. That means from all mandatory as well as recommended provision. And you can use as well the recommended provisions to show your conformance to the EN. And the target group are all sorts of supplier organizations. That means manufacturers, in-house, the testing departments, and independent assessment labs. So next slide, please. That's your Kirsty.
Sorry, yes. So this is on, I think this slide was you, Gisela, sorry.
Yeah, but I can say something about this, don't worry. So this is about what Alban said already. There was, of course, according to the Cyber Security Act, there are ETSI, there are these regulations which are to come, and as well certifications which are to come. And for the Cyber Security Act for Consumer IoT, there will be as well a certification scheme developed. And this is, I think, very important that the EU Council conclusions on the cyber security of connected devices just claimed this. The EN and the TS are, I think, as we said already, very well placed to provide the foundation of a basic level. And so I think I will tell this afterwards a bit. So I think this could build a bridge, the TS, and coming from the EN, of course, could build a bridge to additional certification schemes, for instance, private one, or this one which is just seen with or seen the development with the Cyber Security Act. And so I think these are very good news that we can build this together, actually. So we can say that the EN and the TS are in line with the Cyber Security Act. Okay, so next slide, please. So that is one from me additionally. So you see, as I said, an example for this mapping from the EN and the TS to future cybersecurity IoT schemes or private schemes. And just to show you, the EN has this ICS, the checklist, which is very interesting for self-assessment. But it has as well with the TS this exit description, which is more descriptive, and both could be actually used for self-assessment or for certification schemes which are used together with third parties, fulfilling a certification procedure. And of course, this the assessment schemes could contain as well additional requirements like the tester expertise. It's as well an ISO standard, by the way, and the status of current status of the cryptographic state of the art. So additional cryptographic requirements that would make these requirements as well more stringent and more testable in a way that it's comparable. And this shows my next slide, please. Kirsty, next slide. Thank you. So I give you two examples, I think, one for the self-assessment. That's now one of the German side. That's the German IT security IoT label, which is planned, I think, for starting this project in summer. That it relies very strongly on the German security, IT security law, which as well will be, I think, ready in summer. And it's based extremely on a manufacturer declaration. And this is combined with a dynamic information component, and market surveillance is planned by the German BSI. And I have some extra slides additionally if you need further information on this. So the next example would be, as I said before, no, just one slide back. Of course, I'm not quite finished, I would say, with this one. So we have, don't worry. So we have this next example would be a private IoT scheme, I said the one under the CSA is planned, but this private scheme is, for instance, CESIP, and they did, and that is the good news as well, they did already a mapping from the EN and the TS to their schemes. So this scheme could then be adapted and used and show compliance with AN. And as I said before, it has additional advantages, of course, if you use such a scheme, because then you can have more, I think, comparability regarding the test activity, and you could reuse certain components which are already evaluated, even with a higher evaluation possibility, so assurance level, for instance, what Alban showed us in the last Eurosmart presentation. So this is quite possible, and this eases, I think, as well, to use as well, I think, components with a higher conformance level. So next slide, please. So I think we said already that we would like to show you as well the support of the EN in direction to the market access legislation. What was already mentioned as well by Alban was a radio equipment directive, which now is in the mood of building a draft for specific requirements, security requirements, and as well formulate a standardization request for the STOs, that means ETSI and CEN. But I think we have to say that the EN is not quite suitable to become a harmonized standard as such, but it can inform the development. The reason was already explained by Kirsty. We have not only mandatory requirements, which are really important to become a harmonized standard, but as well recommended ones. That is one reason. And the other reason is that most of the security requirements are security-based, and so they have sort of subjective, I think, assessment, and harmonized standards is expected to have a very clear notion about if this requirement is accepted or not, and if it fails or if it does not fail. So that is somehow the reason why the EN as such is not suitable to become a harmonized standard. So I give the floor now to Kirsty again. So thank you as well from my side. And just nevertheless, regarding the time frame, it's not possible to show them, but of course, I hope that the information will be provided to you as well. So thank you very much. And we are open for questions, and we are glad to answer your concerns or questions or remarks. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Gisela and Kirsty, for this very good information about the work that has been performed here in Europe to address this consumer IoT security. I think it's very important to note this very pragmatic approach that has been adopted and which really aims at addressing real-life problems that we've faced recently and mitigating them. And this is also good to note that this provides a basis that may be used in support of legislation at some point. I will actually propose that we move now to the presentations by our Korean colleagues, so that we get a good overview of what's been done in Europe, how cybersecurity is approached in South Korea, and then we'll use the panel discussion to maybe answer questions that could be focusing on the EN 303.645, will probably also ask feedback, I would say, from the Korean colleagues about the approach. But maybe now let's move to the presentations from Korea. And I would like to first welcome Professor Heng-Yul Yoon from the Suncheonhyang University. I'm really sorry if I butcher the names. And he will deliver a presentation on cybersecurity standards for consumer IoT devices. Professor Yoon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Heng-Yul Yoon. I am professor for the Suncheonhyang University. I thought you pronounced was very good. And then currently I am a chairman of IoT study group 17, security. So you may know IoT, I assume you may know very much about the IoT. So actually study group 17 is responsible for developing standard in the area of security and data security, so-called PII protections. So next slide, please. This slide consists of two parts. One part is a IoT security overview, and then other part consists of study group 17 activities and then related regulation of Korea's IoT security certifications. So let me introduce the IoT. So according to our law, so-called very long ICT law. So I would like to abbreviate rules, but IoT device is called network connected devices. So there is a devices, and then the definition of network connected devices is defined in our law. Things to connect the network, which can exchange data between pupils and things or among things, which is based on ICT. So our certification scheme can cover very broad range of IoT devices. So we cover IoT devices for the smart factory. We also cover IoT devices for home automation, home environment, for example, smart registrator, or smart TV, or smart car, and smart door locks, including such as smart keys. So our IoT security certificate, I believe that sometimes we assume that there is a communication interface, so which is attached to the network. So sometimes that network is isolated, operated, but mostly the network is a public network, that is a internet. So I think that we also cover a IP camera, which is very important from our point of view. Thank you. And next slide, please. So let me show some characteristics of IoT devices. So normally we have a PCs or we have a notebooks, but when we operate notebooks, the device is working. But compared to that, IoT devices is operate 24 hours, 7 days online. And then I think the most of IoT devices is implemented by using for example, open source. So for example, Linux. So we identify there is no effective antivirus solutions to protect IoT devices from malware penetrations. And then we identify most of the, as the previous presentation said, there is a mostly sometimes IoT device use a weak and default password. So universal default password is used. So I think that we Korean IoT certification, there is one criteria. So to check if default password is changed to the user password given by user. So that is one of the, so, and then even IoT devices is connected to the public network, but sometimes they use a public IP that could be another vulnerability, provide another vulnerabilities for attackers. And then, as I said, there are many operation systems to implement IoT devices. And currently, we identify there are no patch functions. So if some vulnerabilities are identified, so manufacturer needs to provide a patch to fill the vulnerabilities for the IoT. But most of the IoT devices does not implement a patch functions. And then, so for example, of the IoT devices, as I said in previous slide, web camera and smart car and IP camera and internet-based storage devices. That is a typical IoT devices. Next slide, please. Thank you. Actually, our Korean delegates are focusing on the two international standard developing body. First one is a smart stack IoT study of 17. And the other one is as you may know, ISO IJDC1 S27. So actually there is a question 6, security for telecommunication service and IoT. Actually these questions is responsible for develop we call recommendation, which is a international standard for IoT security and privacy. And then actually there is a ISO S27, and also under the SCI 27, there is a working group 5. Working group 5 is focusing on identity management and those privacy technology. So actually there is currently one work items regarding the privacy preparation model. I think that could be applicable to the IoT devices. And then working group 4 may have a IoT security code of practice. So I think that that is a major groups of the digital international standard. And we also have some other groups working on this IoT security and privacy. Next slide, please. So since I'm a chairman of the, yes, I am no. So I will add, thank you very much, good comments. So I will add the SC work, since I know there are to this workshop, I know there is some activities. I will add as the organization here in this slide. Thank you very much for providing a good comments. And then since I am a chairman of the ITT Study Group 17, so I briefly give some overview of the security standard activities in Study Group 17. Actually, Study Group 17, as of April 10th, we have many recommendations already approved. For example, Exercise 1361 has been approved on September 2018. Security framework for Internet of Things based on the gateway model. So actually, this standard covers a security framework. That means that to identify a vulnerability or threat, we call threat, and then to mitigate, to address that threat, we may need a security capability. The objective of this intention of this recommendation is not to develop a requirements, but instead to provide a security capabilities. So that is so actually this is one recommendation with Korea delegates was actively involved to develop this recommendation. And then the other one is Extat 1362, simple encryption procedure. And then the other one is ITUT 1363, which was approved last May, technical framework of PII handling system in IoT environments. So I think that this is a kind of the relevance to the privacy issues, to address privacy, privacy threats. And then there are some other recommendations already approved. And then actually we have many work items under development. First one is IoT Sector 4, security requirements for IoT devices and gateway. Actually, the editor of this work item is experts from Korea Internet and Security Agencies. So the intention of this work item is provide a security controls which are defined, currently are defined in our specifications, key SAS specifications, which can be used to conduct a IoT security certification in Korea. So I think that this IoT Sector 4 could be one of the security IoT security standard that can be used for IoT security certifications. Let's move to the next one. So let me, among them, I'd like to pick up two recommendations, ITT recommendation. First one is a security framework for IoT based on gateway model. Actually, as I said, this was approved in September 2018. And then you see there is a three part: sensor part, network part, and platform part. So between the sensor and the platform, there is a gateway. So all the gateway is aggregated data from the sensor. So that is a basic assumption of this recommendation. So the scope is very simple. So identify security threat and then describe a security capability to address or mitigate this identified security threat and challenges. So next slide, please. So in these recommendations, several threats has been identified in terms of four network elements. First one is a IoT devices, and second is a network itself, and third one is IoT gateway, and fourth one is platform. So for example, it's not a full list, but I pick up some of these threats in the IoT 1361 data capturing. So I think if attacker can use some malware to capture data, that is one. And then so other types threat can be sinkhole attack and civil attack and frauding attack, DDoS attack so-called, and then impersonation of the sensor. That is a main threat that this recommendation identified. So I would like to skip details. I assume you can look at, because besides, I think that the previous speaker mentioned that all SC standards are available free of charge. So same. So ITUT recommendation are available free of charge to everyone. So I think that if you Google and then you can download and then you can use this one. But there is some exceptions, because ISO international standard is not free of charge. So if we call common text. So common text is developed by both organizations, ISO and ITUT. So in that cases, we need ITUT needed to respect a IPR policy, our partner of JTC1 or ISO. So in that cases, access control to access that ITUT recommendation is provided. So that is not a freely available. Thank you. Please go to the next slide. So I think that providing a security capability to address or mitigate a threat identified and challenges is very important. So also this recommendation describe a four category of the capability. I mean security capability. So there are category of the general capability. So for example, a secure communication capability and secure key management capability and authentication capability, and all the capabilities part of that category. And then there is three capabilities for devices and for gateways and for platform. So those devices this recommendation provides a detailed security capability that some network elements or IoT devices may have. So that is a main points. And then move to the next slide. Actually, we have ITUT published this IX.1363 technical framework of PII handling in IoT environments, actually which was approved in May 2020. So the main concept is there is a privacy preference model. So concept of the privacy preference model is adopted. So actually, there is some place, a privacy preference manager. So user can configure his privacy preference in that a privacy preference manager. And then so the privacy preference defines which data can be collected from the IoT devices and which data can be transferred to the some third party or data controller or data processor. So that is a kind of the access control mechanisms. So I think that this function should be provided with a user-friendly interfaces. So the objective of this recommendation is to provide specify a technical framework of PII handling systems. So that is a main. So I think that data can be shared among the multiple service provider based on the user's privacy preference, which can be configured by user itself. So that is a main objective. Next slide, please. So in these recommendations, there are two types of the framework. First one is a basic framework for PII handling, and then there's a extended framework also defined in these recommendations. So actually, principle for a user interface to configure PII preference in this described in this recommendation. First, provide a easy access for all users, and then for access control needs to be provided to the user interface, and if possible, it could provide a comprehensive scope, and then provide a easy to use. And then on the right side, so technical framework for PII data handling by a single service provider are defined. So if you see this figure, there is a PII preference manager. So user can configure this PII processor. So that processor, the privacy manager is controlled by user. And then so that the PII manager can control the collection data control from the IoT devices, and then sharing with other among the applications. So I think the key part of this control is a PII preference manager. So that is I would like to introduce to you for the two recommendations. Korean delegates are actively involved during the development phase of these recommendations. And then the next slide, please. Actually, as I said, I think the details of the Korea IoT security certification scheme will be provided by our KISA colleague. But I just, in this presentation, I just provide some legal background for IoT security certification. As I said, we have a act. I think this one could be comparable to the Cybersecurity Act in Europe, but I think that this act is only cover a IoT security issues. So the legal ground is in act on promotion of information and communications network utilization and protection, etc. So I think that this one provide a legal ground for IoT security certification, which are now in place in Korea. And if you look at there is a article 485. The title is a response to the implement accident related to the network connected devices. So actually we have a Ministry of Science and ICT may support a expenses necessary for carrying out a following project: research and the improvement of standards for testing, inspection, and certification related to the network connected devices. As I said, our law use a term network connected devices, which can be equivalent, each is equivalent to the IoT devices. And then there is another clause here called a certification of network connected devices. So this our ministry may grant a certificate if network connected devices meet the criteria, certification testing criteria as a result of the test by the certification testing delegates organization. So we, KISA may have act as a authorization authority, but KISA, based on this law, there are several certification test delegates organizations can be appointed. So we in Korea, we may have a certification test clarity. The clarity can be shared among the all certification test delegation organization. And then that criteria is developed by our government, our ministry, and also KISA. And so our ministry may establish and they publicly announce a certificate criteria for the stability of the securing the reliability of the information for certification. So that is a legal ground. And next slide, please. I would conclude my presentation. I think security by design or privacy by design should be applied for the IoT devices and also called network connected devices from the beginning, not a after deployment. And then controls or criteria items should be based on risk-based approach. Actually, in our Korea's criteria item covers a mostly technical controls. So we thought currently we did not cover some control for a development environment. But I think that there is some criteria regarding the secure development life cycle. So that is one. I think that currently we have a security association level for full life cycle of IoT devices should be considered. And then use of the international standard, for example, by ITO or ISO, to define a criteria is prepared from our point of view. And then certification scope should be included to the all IoT consumer devices, equipment and systems. So we start from the IoT devices, but our plan is to extend the scope to cover equivalent and systems. And I think that I know in USA or EU, there is a IoT certification scheme, so mutual recognition between Korea IoT security certification and EU IoT security certification may need in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this explanation of the work performed in ITU and the relevance to this today's topic. I would like now to welcome Mr. Sanjol Lee, who is a general researcher at the KISA, so the Korean Information Security Agency, to elaborate more on the approach in Korea. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I am Sanjol Lee. I am KISA general researcher. For starter, I'd like to say that I am pleased to introduce to Korean IoT security program and standard. Before going to the main point, okay, I'd like to briefly introduce the IoT security assurance program, which is now in force in Korea in 2017. The guide for IoT security assurance program were developed, and this program was officially enforced in December 2017. A total of 78 products have tested and certified until March 2021. Gradually, the IoT security assurance program is being activated, and as of April 2021, about 50 products are undergoing the security test. Okay, next. The list of Korean IoT security assurance program and standard I'm going to introduce is as follows. What I am going to explain is divided into 3 items, and the title for individual item are IoT security assurance program introduction, IoT security assurance program process and certification criteria, IoT security assurance program activation plan, and IoT security assurance program requirement and standard. Below this presentation, I will call the IoT security assurance program to the IoT SAP. It is just it is a similar UL cap, yeah. So it is just abbreviation of the IoT security assurance program. Okay. Okay, next. The IoT SAP was developed to ensure the security of IoT product as IoT device are rapidly spreading and security threats are sharply increasing as a result. Actually, in 2017, IP camera hacking accidents happened. 30 hackers hacked over 2,600 IP camera installed for security purpose in home, restaurant, coffee shop, and school. Then the Ministry of Science and ICT announced the comprehensive countermeasure for IP cameras. Hacking procedure is very simple. First, gathering IP camera ID at wholesale mart. ID is exposed on product box and connected the IP camera at home and input ID and the default password. Eventually, user normally don't want to change default password because we very often forgot the password and it is a little annoying thing. To prepare the standard for the basic requirement for promoting the internationalization of security in IoT product that close to the everyday life of citizens and ensuring safety against cyber threat, basic testing and certification of IoT products are conducted. As per the ground for enforcing the IoT SAP, Korea developed the internal guideline based on the work scope of KISAR, pursuant to the Act on Promotion of Information and Communication Network Utilization and Information Protection. It is in 2017 and has been enforced since December 2017 as a voluntary certification system. All certification consulting and testing tools are provided as free public service. KISA, which enforcing this program, is an entrusted type quasi-governmental agency under the Ministry of Science and ICT that promote the Internet of Korea and conduct activity for Internet information protection and international cooperation in this regard. Next, IoT SAP is classified into the 3 grades by reflecting the various type of IoT device and security demand, and certification target are limited to IoT product, interworking mobile apps and functional module. The test period is 1 and 2 weeks for light, 2 and 3 weeks for basic, and 4 and 5 weeks for standard. And the requirements were developed for the standard grade according to the global security level, and the requirements handled by IoT SAP are largely divided into 5 categories. The 5 topics of the requirement are authentication, cryptography, data protection, platform protection, and physical protection. And the little grade has 10 sub-items, the base 10 sub-items. The base grade has 23 sub-items, and standard grade has 41 sub-items. And there are various product groups certified in 2018 to 2021. Most of them are 20 resource device, and they were tested and certified as light. And 2018, 4 products certified, and in 2019, 24 products certified. In 2020, 41 products certificated. In 2021 March, 9 products certificated. So total, we are 78 products certificated. So it is some IoT sensor, smart device, digital door, smart plug. We are certificated this product. And next, the expected advantages of IoT SAP activation are to induce voluntary reinforcement of security, contribute to the domestic IoT companies advance into overseas market by reinforcing their security competency and relieving public anxiety about IoT product. Additional benefit of IoT SAP certification are public procurement, service provision of security certification banner, support for the internet shopping mall, and free use of high price test tool, and security consulting. If IoT product acquire KISA IoT SAP certification, they will receive a certification mark, and they will also receive sticker as confirmation sign. So we provide security test bed for various IoT service. It is smart home, smart energy, smart car, smart factory, smart medical, smart safety, environment, and smart construction. And next, I will introduce the IoT SAP implementation system, application procedure, and security requirement to you. In the IoT SAP implementation system, the policy agency, i.e., the Ministry of Science of ICT, establishes policies and improve the system. And KISA conduct certification examination, convenes certification committee meeting, and discuss operation of the certification authority. The application applied to the KISA for IoT self-certification, and KISA issue certificated. And next, it is IoT security assurance program process. The application will submit the preliminary review document about the product and the application form. Establish the meeting schedule regarding the material to be submit and test, and review the submit document and product. During the review, the security grade of the product will be determined, and an agreement about the requirement will be reached. Also, the IoT SAB check if the device implement the security function for each requirement and receive the final submission, issue receipt, and conclude the contract. If this test is conducted after the conclusion of the contract and non-conformities are found during the test, the IoT SAB will request improvement measure, and if improvement measure are taken, the test resume. If the test finds that requirements are met, it will prepare the test report, and if expert review of the test result is complete, the certificate which you see in front of you will you issued. Next, it is the IoT security of the programs document. So IoT SAB application, IoT SAB contract, IoT SAB document, and it is IoT SAB certification with our sample document. And it is, and next is activation plan. Although also a lot of government support for the IoT SAB and free service were provided for over 3 years, enterprises do not yet have a positive attitude toward IoT security. The reason is that enterprises look on security as optional, non-mandatory, and they are greatly repulsed by the increasing develop cost and product price. As cybersecurity to IoT devices are gradually become more sophisticated and security incidents are increasing, however, we are making effort to activate the IoT security evaluation program. As a few plans for activation, we are trying to cooperate with institutions or local government that purchase IoT product in large quantities and making legal ground for IoT security assurance by reinforcing IoT device security at the government level. Next, I will explain the security requirement. The IoT SAB is divided into 5 categories: authentication, cryptographic, data protection, platform protection, and physical protection. And authentication items are divided into user authentication, safe use of authentication information, and divided authentication. Cryptography is divided into checking the use of safe encryption algorithm, safe key management, and generation of safe random number. And data protection is segmented into transmission and data at rest protection, information flow control, safe session management, and personal information protection. Platform protection consists of various test items, and software security, safe update, security management, audit record, and timestamp are checked. Lastly, for physical protection, physical interface protection and defense against unauthorized operation are checked. More specifically, if the IoT devices support user interface as shown in the diagram, authentication means a requirement that it must go through the authentication process. And even if it directly accesses the internal OS, it is mandatory to support the access control function. And secondly, as for cryptography, the IoT SAP check the requirement about key management, which is basic to encryption. And if the life cycle of the key is appropriately complied with, it was checked if the encryption algorithm in use is safe and proven. The requirements of cryptography are basic to the encryption used for data protection and platform protection. Next, the IoT SAP check the data protection item. That is whether encryption of data in transit and data at rest is performed normally, and whether encryption was performed according to the standard of encryption that were explained previously. Next, as I explained above, platform protection, which consists of various items, checks if known vulnerability are removed, and the secure coding and security update function is supported, and integrity inspection, audit recording, and regular timestamp update are performed. Platform protection service is the infrastructure of security. And lastly, physical protection checks if the OS or memory is protection against the unauthorized access through the external and internal interface of the IoT device. The table you see shown the detail requirement of the IoT SAP. The initial shown in the table, L is a light, P is a basic, S is a standard. Stand for light, basic, basic and standard. And light has 10 checked item, basic has a 23 checked item, and standard has 41 checked item. If you more information on the detailed requirement and the guide to the IoT SAP, please email me. Okay. The next is standardization. I understand that the IoT cybersecurity law, the nation's first IoT cybersecurity law, is already applied to the California and Oregon, US, also Europe Cybersecurity Act law. And currently, we are trying to make this program part of ITUT standardization. I believe that international standardization of security assurance can increase export due to cross recognition of overseas certification, and will lead to preliminary review of unfamiliar security requirement. And it is IoT X.IoT SEC for contribution. The following is the X.IoT SEC for contribution that is being standardized through ITUT. We are standardizing on the IoT security requirement mentioned earlier. The standard is aimed at the end of this year, but we plan to make effort to standardizing it by the beginning of next year. Okay, that will wrap up my introduction of the IoT security evolution program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation of the work performed by Kisa on this topic of security. So we are running quite late, but I think it's very interesting to entertain this exchange after the presentations, and before I allow, of course, for questions to be asked between yourselves. I'd like to make a short remark, which is about the existing cooperation agreement that is active, I would say, between ETSI and TTA, and I think there is a real opportunity to progress, also work on getting international standards. Through global cooperation of regional organizations like ETSI and TTA, which can connect communities of experts and also leverage the work that has been done already on each side. So as a quick reminder, the cooperation agreement that exists between TTA and ETSI is something that allows joint development of deliverables, and that also allows for adoption of ETSI standards by TTA and also adoption of TTA standards by ETSI. So I think it's fairly clear that on the ETSI side, what has been presented on EN 303645 is something that clearly is also offered to any interested body to reuse and to actually leverage in support of local legislation. But we can maybe come back to this. I'd like to ask a very simple question. We saw that in Europe there is an approach that was started looking at consumer IoT as one element that needs to be kept under control, I would say, so that it is not used as a proxy, I would say, to attack some more critical infrastructures and things like this. And the first question I would ask to the panelists is can we really disconnect industrial IoT from consumer IoT? Is it something that is realistic, or is it a mistake? Gisela, you want to?
Yes. So maybe I can make start actually. So you know that for ETSI there is this very strong feeling for the consumer IoT standardization, and they provided a lot of standards for 10, JTC 13, also from the European side, to see they are more on this industrial side and try to provide standards. But overall, of course, there is, for instance, ISO for this SC27 standards, which are more generic. But as I said before, for instance, in my presentation and the one, of course, which I shared with Kirsty, that there is really a challenge already between the IoT devices to provide meaningful provisions for all IoT devices. And so a generic standard, of course, would be much more generic and would not be so stringent in the security requirements. So we need an umbrella, and I think that is very good for ISO and other standardization, international standardization organization to provide this. But on the other side, we need as well this difference because there are different security requirements actually for the industrial sector as for the consumer IoT. We should not lay the burden, I think, for the consumer IoT. Too much. So I think that is I think very important to be pragmatic on this. What we showed with the ETSI standardization, I think.
Thank you, Gisela. Professor Yoon.
Thank you. So I think that this is a very good question, I believe. Actually, in Korea, IoT certification scheme covers a both aspect, devices for the sector-specific industry and also consumer IoT devices. So consumer IoT device is a part of the devices we cover in Korea. And then I think that we have a three types of the security requirements. That is a first, confidentiality services, and second is integrity services, and third one is availability services. I think that for the devices for the industrial IoTs, I think that availabilities and then integrated services with a low latencies should be focused. And then, for example, consumer devices, we need to focusing on some privacy aspect of the devices. So I think that to protect the privacy, confidential technology or services is needed. So I think that it may be a mixed situation, but that is my point. So I think that we can have some common requirements, but depending on the sectors, we have some specific requirements that can be applicable to, for example, devices for industry IoT and also consumer IoT device. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm wondering. I mean, we had multiple references to international standardization bodies, as well as US-based organizations as well. We know, I mean, from experience, I would say we know that the ETSI and TTA can work together in the context of global partnerships like 3GPP or 1M2M, or even as a direct cooperation. I would say bilateral cooperation. Are there topics that would be relevant for ETSI and TTA to explore together? I understood from the various presentations that, for example, if we want certification to build on standards, and at the same time, if we want certification to not create duplication of efforts in for example, for Korean manufacturers that want to address the European market, or the opposite, is there maybe a stream of exchange that should be created for ETSI and TTA experts to look at what the certification is building on, or is going to build on, in order to identify these common elements and those where there are differences, in order to try and minimize them. Is it something that could be an area of cooperation with TTA and or between TTA and ETSI?
If I may, this is Ko speaking.
Yes, Casey, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Very wonderful question, and very fruitful question. Yes, it's a possible way to cooperate with some common criteria to certification program, I think, but this is a little bit different from standard. The TTA is only focusing on establishment of the standard, and then another certification program is the kind of some another issue. But KISA, KISA is the professional agency in the security area. KISA also we cooperate with the related person very closely. So I think that we TTA and KISA and ETSI is cooperate together. We come up with some program and some procedure is possible. That is my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, when I was referring to this cooperation, of course, on our side, we are providers and developers of standards. And hopefully the certification schemes will build on standards. So indeed, our work would be in partnership with the organizations that ultimately set up and operate the certification schemes, like KISA, maybe like ENISA in Europe as well. Also, it means work with our colleagues from CEN and CENELEC in Europe, where there is a joint effort on IoT security. But clearly, I think our very concrete work between ETSI and TTA should focus on identifying those standards that are used by certification programs where we have some level of control and work towards kind of harmonization of those standards. And I think this is really our scope, I would say.
Okay, after this workshop, we will keep in touch with this item, how to enhance the cooperation on the IoT security and certification program. Okay.
Thank you. Professor Yum, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So I think the first step, I agree with you that we TTA and SC role is to develop a standard. So we have a TTA standard and then SCSA standard, and then so IoT certification, security certification should be based on the standard. So I think that we can use a, thank you very much for informing us that we have a cooperation agreement between SC and TTA. So within that frameworks, so first step, I think that we could form some kind of the expert groups, bring some groups, experts from both Korea and SC, EU. And then so next step would be we have our standard, but de facto standard, which is not open to the public Korean committee, but I think that is not a TTA standard currently. So I think that we have our standard basis which can be used based for the Korea IoT security certification. And then I assume SC also has some SC and documents. So I think that we can have some kind of the expert groups. So and then to do a comparison, and then finally, if it's possible, we can have at the end of the day, we can have some hopefully a common text between SC and TTA, and then next step could be possible. For example, I think the final final target could be a mutual recognition between SC, IoT security certification scheme and Korea IoT certification scheme. So I think that we have some difference. I know there is we have a 3 assurance level, and then maybe SC also have a different assurance level. So I think that is another issue to be addressed. So I think that we first step is to do a comparative studies between our default standard and also SC standard. I think that is a first step. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this concrete proposal. Gisela, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say, of course, it's important actually as a part of the recognition. So maybe the standards may be different, and we have already with the European standard. But on the other hand, I think a comparison, of course, is very important to see, okay, where are the differences to the Korean input and the ETSI or CEN together with CEN input, because CEN as well had a mutual agreement with ETSI on this. And then to see, okay, what I said before, what is with evaluation or certification concept? How would this fit to the Cybersecurity Act, and would the Korean standard fit as well fit to use as a bridge to the Cybersecurity Act, and of course vice versa, what an ETSI standard would be recognized, for instance, for certificates agreement in Korea. I think that is a very important step, that there's no additional burden on the manufacturers to provide additional requirements for their products, for instance, for Korea or vice versa.
Yes, Gisela, I think it is a very important point to avoid this unnecessary duplication of effort, of course, without compromising on security itself. But exactly. this is really something that we should strive to reach basically in the future. Okay, I think this is a very concrete, proposal that we have on the table to gather the experts on the topic of. Sorry, just for 1 second. Sorry. So this is something that we should entertain indeed in the future, connecting the experts, comparing the various approaches, and making sure that we have the necessary basis to have the necessary understanding to identify these commonalities, the discrepancies between the approaches, and this will then be a very good basis to be used as part of any potential mutual recognition discussions. And our role here in ETSI, and I assume also as TTA here, is not only to be there as developer standards, but also in connecting the communities and the experts that are relevant on that matter. As we mentioned earlier, in Europe, this is also about bringing maybe ENISA on the table, CEN, as Gisela was mentioning, and also KISA on the Korean side. So it is probably a very good action to take in the near future. With this, actually, I think we should try and wrap up for today. I would offer that Emilio maybe gives, from the European Commission, gives a few words of conclusion before I leave the task to conclude to Casey Koo just after that. Emilio?
Yeah, thank you. I think that really this workshop that went into so much technical detail, I have really enjoyed it because I think that there was some useful conclusions that we could explain there. And to be honest, I was a little bit concerned about the fact, because I see from the presentation from both sides that we have a common problem statements, common challenges, but then the problem would be whether at the end of the day, for having these certification schemes, and Gisela has explained quite well, let's try to avoid additional burden to manufacturers of equipment. At the end of the day, you may have some standards, test suites that could differ, possibly slightly, not too much, because we start from the same problem analysis and categorizations, but we may have slightly different standards, and that could be a problem for a manufacturer that would like to sell the product in both regions. Also, I was a little bit concerned when having this European standard already available that could be used, and in particular through this cooperation agreement between ETSI and TTA in South Korea, in Korea, without not much problem. Then we see that KISA is proposing a recommendation in ITUT, which is normal development, I understand, from Korea, but with risk that at the end of the day we have a European standard that may be applicable or is applicable in Europe, and then a recommendation from ITUT which may be slightly different. And this is what we tried to avoid. If we have common problems, it's better to have common solutions to avoid burdens to the manufacturers, and maybe also some confusion to the citizens whether to use one or the other. So I think the way forward that has been proposed, I think this is a good conclusion from the problems, looking at the two schemes and what are the commonalities, whether there are differences, where these differences can be incorporated in one or the other in order to have a common product that then make the certification similar, and then maybe if needed to bring the common one to the international standardization rather than to produce divergent standards that could only create problems due to fragmentation of the market. So I conclude by encouraging you, and I think maybe Indico could support that, to have these actions to continue the cooperation, analyzing the two schemes, the de facto standard on one side and the standard on the other, and see what are the commonalities, differences, and whether we can arrive a common one at the end of the day. So thank you very much, and congratulations to all the participants for the thorough discussion.
Thank you very much, Emilio. And Casey, now the floor is yours for the conclusion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Javier. I think personally, this workshop is very useful for me to some extend my knowledge to some smart city and IoT security. I would like to say some general comment. We only 2 days about the 5 hours workshop, but as before, we didn't have this a deeper and practical discussion as before. But thanks to the Indico program, we have a lot of the findings and the takeaways to tackle in the future and the cooperation strongly. Especially yesterday, we discussed about the smart city, but the smart city is a very broad issue. But today, before we just adopt the ETSI standard to the TTA standard through the cooperation agreement, but this time we shared some valuable IoT security scheme standard and certification cooperation item. Anyway, it's a very fruitful review. But I hope this Indico program, even Indico is ended, but we continue to cooperate with each other, HG and TTA, continuously forever. Anyway, finally, I would like to conclude by saying that I would like to express my sincere express gratitude for wonderful arrangement of this workshop, especially at you, Mr. Jabir, and then a little bit your Ilino and our TTA staff. And, I'm sorry not to meet the co-star. Please give my best regard to him, and then I think that he getting well better. Anyway, I hope you will safe and healthy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Casey. I would like to invite everybody to turn their camera to say goodbye. And again, thanks a lot for the experts involved. What we did today is the beginning. We want to foster these exchanges further, connect the experts, and make progress together. I think it's a good trigger today. It's something to be continued. And thanks again to Kate at TTA and Michael on the Indico team for all the support in making the workshop possible. So thank you very much again. Have a good end of day, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.